Hi, Alan Matthew here again to discuss ways of memorizing Scripture. One of the things you may have encountered in the Bible, as well as in your daily life, is a list of things or names that you would like to remember. For example, you probably know that the first 3 chapters in the book of Revelation address 7 churches that were located in what was then called Asia. But do you remember the names of those 7 churches in order? You could memorize the list of churches by writing them down and then saying them over and over again very rapidly, hoping they'll stick in your brain. But there is a very simple visual way to remember them called the link method. You simply form a mental image of something concrete and vivid for each item in the list, and then you visually link each item to the next item to form a chain. Then, when you want to remember the list, each visualization will remind you of the item and of the next item. So to illustrate, I'm going to visualize and link the 7 churches in Revelation. You can find those in Revelation 1, verse 11. So church number 1 is Ephesus. This is a name that's not a concrete object that I can visualize directly, so I'm going to have to picture something that sounds like that word. To me, Ephesus sounds like the word emphasis. So I'll imagine someone making a very strong statement to someone else. I see a big exclamation mark over his head. The second church is Smyrna, and that sounds like the word smirk to me. So I imagine a person with a smirky smile on his face, and he's smirking at the first person who is making the emphatic statement with the exclamation mark. So those 2 images are linked together that way. The third church is Pergamos. Now my wife says that reminds her of the word Persian, so I see a fluffy Persian cat. And to link it to the previous church on the list, I imagine the smirking person turning and kicking the Persian cat. Sounds like something a smirking person would do. The fourth church is Thyatira. Here I simply separate the name into 2 words, thy attire, like your clothes. I'm imagining the Persian cat rubbing up against some man's black pants and getting cat hair all over thy attire. The fifth church is Sardis. I just happen to have a friend named Sardar, so I imagine him wearing the black pants, thy attire, with the cat hair from the Persian cat. The 6th church is Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. My friend Sardar is a very friendly person, so I see him shaking hands with the author, Ellen G. White, who lived during the historic time period represented by the Church of Philadelphia. The last church is Laodicea, and I have heard so many sermons about our present-day churches and how we are Laodiceans that I have no trouble remembering this one without visualizing anything. Now I can visually step through the whole list and remember them in order. You know, if the names were not already familiar to me somewhat, I would have to work at it a little more. Some of the genealogies in the Bible would be harder to memorize because the names are so strange to us. But you can usually find some modern word that sounds similar to those old words. For example, look at the first chapter of the book of Matthew, where we find a genealogy from Abraham all the way down to Jesus. We can easily remember Abraham to Isaac, to Jacob, even to Judah, but after that, the names get unfamiliar, like Phares, to Esrom, to Aram, to Aminadab, and so on. Well, I can just imagine Judah, the first Jew, with one of those skull caps, taking tickets to get on a Ferris wheel ride. And getting on the Ferris wheel is one of those chips you see in your computer. It's called a ROM, which stands for read-only memory. But in this case, it reminds me of Esrom. And chasing the ROM toward the Ferris wheel, I might imagine Aram, or a ram, which is a male sheep, of course, ready to butt it. So you can see how I might go on imagining things and linking them together. You know, one weakness of this system, though, is that if you forget one of the links, you might be stuck and not able to move on to the rest of the items in the list. Whereas the memory palace or loci system that we talked about in previous videos is a little safer, since each imagined item is stored on a familiar spot along a pathway. So if you forget one image, you can still go on to the next spot or loci along the path. Well, you might be thinking, why would I want to memorize long lists of names anyway? Well, actually, the names of the patriarchs from Adam down to Noah are good to learn, because those names have special meaning for their time leading up to the flood. There are some things in the Bible, though, that you might want to remember in a list, but don't need to memorize word for word. I mean, take Genesis chapter 1, for example. Maybe you don't care to memorize that whole chapter word for word, but you still like to remember what God created on each day and get them in the correct order. Or maybe you're taking a Bible class and need to remember the kings of Israel or Judah in order. Or maybe the steps in the Christian growth. You find that in 2 Peter 1, chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. Or maybe you just want to remember where you left your keys. Sorry, I don't think I can help you with that one.